Hi, welcome to this week's edition of Blues Talk. Where again, John, Dave, and myself are going to look back over Leinster's pretty poor performance at the weekend against Edinburgh and look forward to the two Pro 12 semi-finals this weekend coming. So, boys, 15-13, but a very poor game.
Well, I was at my nephew's 5th birthday party earlier that day in the big blue barn down in Carlow, and there was more organisation from the hordes of kids running around than one once saw on the pitch. It was a diabolical game. But that happens sometimes. You can't be playing barbarians rodeo rugby every day of the week. Now people will say that we haven't been playing it any day of the week, but yeah, it was a poor performance. It was poor stuff. Conditions didn't help, but that's the way it goes. We got the win. We finished up on top of the group for the first time in 2 years. I think we got a record points total since the Italian teams came in. And it's the highest points total we've scored. So it is a case of some things are good. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, we finished top of the group. We finished top of the league. We got a home quarter semi-final. But, the rugby could improve. I definitely wouldn't disagree with that.
Yeah, it was possibly the worst game I've seen Leinster play in I don't know how long. It was hard to watch. We just seemed to want to knock it on or make mistakes, or the Kearneys had a reasonably good game, you have to say. Outside of that, there were very
scrum
few.
Improved when the two new props came
the
out.
The scrum was a lottery. I think Cian Healy had a lot to do with that improvement, because it seemed to, the very first scrum, in fact, it seemed to be him. Whatever the tight head was doing.
People kind of forgot who the Edinburgh tight head is. He is.
Nell, yeah.
He is one of the better tight heads in Northern European rugby. I mean,
not little Nell.
No, he's a very good player. I mean, we were looking for him when the word came out that he was coming north. Leinster were in after him, Ulster were in after him, Munster were in after him. He's one of the better players. So he did cause us problems. Now, Ross Ford is a very good player as well. Now, Ali Dickey, I'm not so sure about Alistair Dickinson. He's okay. He's serviceable. So, we should have. But it was Nell that was causing the problems. It was McGrath was having problems.
It's funny, especially in a Scottish accent, how the name Ross Forward sounds like lost forward. Really.
Well, there was plenty of that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
our handling went to pot.
Our line out was a lottery, even more so than our scrum. How many times did we kick penalties and lose the bloody line out that we got from it? Set piece was.
But the wind was an absolute nightmare out there, in fairness.
The wind was dodgy, there was rain, it was wet ball, there was plenty of excuses, but the top 2 inches were not there.
But the sad thing was, like, we picked a very, very strong team. There was 14 Irish internationals playing.
Like
Kirchner pulled out before the kick-off, but it was replaced by Rob Kearney. There was 3 of the starting lines from last summer, and then we had 5 more internationals on the bench. The team is so strong, yet we just can't seem to put any cohesiveness together in the season.
There's a whole variety of kind of, if you like, contributing factors. One, the first and foremost is we're not in form at the moment.
No, but you see, the team. I think the team lacks confidence, and they're playing.
Well, but that all contributes to. You can say that. Okay, we'd say that as another contributory factor.
And there are many.
And another one is the team knew all they needed to get what they wanted out of the season. Was a losing bonus point.
Well,
that's all they needed, So
a win to top the.
A win. Well, a losing bonus point would have topped it as well.
We got the win.
Well, we got the win, but yeah. There was an element that there's a certain element, like there is sometimes with Munster Leinster games in the Aviva or indeed Downtown Park. There is a certain element of before the Lord Mayor show about these games.
I knew you were going to use that phrase tonight. I don't know why.
Yeah, but because it does come up. If you look at
of term,
if you look at the performances that we've often been more disappointed about, they've often come before significant
and Munster too.
More marquee factors, more marquee fixtures. Munster as well have a similar problem.
Well, let's hope it was a case of right. Let's shake out all the bad play. Let's get it out. And we shook it all into one game.
So there are elements of that now, but the other element is we're not playing well at the moment. I mean, we aren't. But the mark of a team, the mark of a champion team, is a team that doesn't play well and still ends up winning and topping the pool.
But the disappointing thing was that we got into a position that we really could have kicked on and opened the floodgates. Yeah. We were 15-6 up with about 25 minutes or so to go.
Yeah.
And if we were playing well, we would have done.
Yeah, and
we're
like
not.
they
kept attacking. We had a
but they
great
had-
third quarter.
we did, but then they got a fairly dubious decision against them for the forward pass. If that try had have been awarded, would have put a whole lot of different perspective
the only
as
thing dubious
as the
was-
table
was
would have
the
finished
actual-
out.
Was the forward pass, because I would have given the penalty for
For a bit
crossing
of crossing, I
beforehand.
agree with you, yeah.
So I don't think they can have any complaints.
It
there.
was a forward
Oh, it
pass,
was a forward pass, but it should
marginally.
have been blown up before that for the crossing. So I mean, it wasn't a try either way. But it all comes down to, I mean, yes, you could say, but it all comes down to the fact that, you know, we're a team that's, for whatever reason, and there are many of them, some external, some internal, just weren't playing well on Saturday. Didn't play well on Saturday.
Yeah, the top 2 inches were not there, and
No.
that's complacency. Look, we're playing Edinburgh, lads. We need anyhow win, skanky win. We got anyhow skanky win. You know, we probably aimed for the, you know, we weren't aiming for the sky there. We were aiming for coasting, and you know,
You see, I'd say they had 2 goals. Like you say, Aniel Skanky win and not get hurt. And unfortunately, we didn't even make those,
yeah.
because a couple of guys did get hurt.
yeah, we
O'Driscoll
lost
looked,
Strauss.
when Visser got his try, O'Driscoll reeled away in pain. He looked like he got a
That
bad
was
stinger, I think. Or,
Fairly in front of me, he got it twice inside of a few seconds. I didn't actually get to see it I didn't get to watch the whole game back, but when I was there live, he thumped into I think it was their tight head prop, and you could see him. I think it was his right shoulder.
yeah, he just reeled
recoiled,
away, yeah.
and then he had to get straight back into the line and bam, and he hit it again within probably 20 seconds. So hopefully he's okay, but I think he is. Seems to be.
He looked okay after in the
Yeah.
presentation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he is made of
shook it
granite,
off,
you know.
but,
true enough.
and he is, you know, nails.
But anyway, there was some positives in the game. We got 2 nice tries. We got our 4
I think
points.
they were nice tries.
And the most important
Yeah.
thing was Sean O'Brien played 50 minutes. So he looked like he was breathing out of his arse towards the end. He still got through.
Even after the half hour, but you know, there's no replacement for games in terms of conditioning. And he looked like a guy who hadn't played for 5 months, but came through it. Hands were a bit not helped by the
Tit-like.
passes. Not helped by the passes he received on one of the occasions, anyway. But you
Made
know,
a couple
he
of good busts.
made a couple of good busts, made his tackles. He's still as physical as ever.
Oh yeah,
That 30 minutes will serve him well next week.
we
you know,
hope so.
Anyway, why don't we look at Murph's first try?
We should have had several of these. We were in a similar position in the third quarter about 3 times, and we should have just bounced our way over. Like this. It looked like we were going to coast when we got this. You know, it looked, here we go. Normal service has been resumed. You could see them; they were all up for it. There, they were. You know, they were.
It was good hard.
It was just a matter of time before somebody got over because they were getting closer and closer to the line.
It was good hard running and a nice line cut by Dave Carney,
And he just
and then
looked-
just too much power.
He just flicked around and there was no players there to greet him, and he had Mike Ross
Yeah.
pushing him, so you know,
Yeah.
they weren't going to stop him anyway.
But like we were on their line in the second half, quite a good bit of
Loads of
times,
times.
and we just didn't
We didn't
convert.
get over. These are the margins.
But then when you're not focused in and you're not really too worried about the opposition, you don't.
Look, I think if we had to score 4 tries, we would have scored 4. If we needed 4
Possibly.
tries,
Yeah, I think so as well. I agree with that. I don't
I
think
don't
we were
know
that.
with the conditions. I don't know. Would we? I'd say we might have exposed ourselves in trying to score them. You know, we might have gone too. Anyway, who knows? Who cares?
I
at this stage?
don't think there's any question that, you know, if we needed to get something out of it, get something more out of it, we would have done.
I think so. Yeah.
So.
But you know, I think it's a recurring theme. Once again, Gottfried was chosen at 10. He didn't certainly say, "Hey, pick me again for next week."
No,
So the debate
didn't
still
have-
lingers on.
Oh, yeah,
for
he didn't have much help from Boss though.
True, that's
trying
very
to make
true.
him
I
look
think
good.
Boss's
You know.
form has gone down the toilet.
He's playing very poorly at the moment. Now I'm a big fan of Isaac
Yeah.
Boss, always have been, but he's playing very, very poorly at the moment.
And let's face it, if you're 9 and 10 are not playing well,
No,
it doesn't matter what pack you have, and it doesn't matter what outside backs you have. If they're not linked together, you
Yeah.
might
Plus,
as
he
well go
looks
home.
very
You know?
indecisive. It's
it's his decision making. His
Yeah, but
decision making,
but
which
sometimes you see
normally
it-
Raptor sharp.
sometimes you see it and he's standing at the base, and it's like the ball is squirted out behind him, and he hasn't
Yeah.
realised that the ball is behind.
You could actually see elements that of good Isaac Boss on Saturday. There were a couple of times he got the ball away nice,
Oh, yeah.
he picked right options, he made nice little breaks. But then
But
that
that's
was
not enough, you know.
but that was mixed with the other stuff as well. So what you could see is you can see a guy who I think is, like you were saying earlier, is a bit short in confidence, because in confidence in himself.
Yeah.
Now, hopefully Owen Redden is back this weekend, because when Leinster play better when
Fingers
Owen Redden is
crossed.
there. I mean, in recent years that's been the case for certain types of games and games against Ulster. Although Isaac Post has a very good record against Ulster, he's generally played well
He
against
always
them.
ups his game against
Yeah.
his old club, all right, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's going to be an interesting choice. It's a tricky predicament they find themselves in. At this, if Redden wasn't available, you'd nearly say McGrath.
I don't think they drop
I
him
know,
for a
into
semi,
semi,
Yeah, but in terms of
He has the temperament.
he has the
Certainly
temperament
has.
for it. Now, if you take away Boss's temperament and Boss's record against Ulster, and just looked at it in pure form, maybe you wouldn't go with Boss at all. But there are those other factors as well.
Redden, if he's on one leg, I think is going to be
Yeah, I'd say so.
starting.
Anyway, Mr. Carney got his first try since I think it was September.
It's been a while anyway.
Amazingly. It was very well taken try as well.
Lovely line he ran, actually.
Yeah. And he had to twist past a few guys as well. It wasn't like, kind of made it look a bit easy.
Well, he's a big, strong, physical guy. I think people forget just how big he actually is.
He's fairly robust, all right.
Yeah. I mean, even that mob was sloppy. I mean, we dropped the ball.
Yeah.
You know.
He could have been paying for that.
Yeah.
Keane just tidied it up.
Ryan. Was that Ryan? Yeah.
I thought he played very well when he
Thought
came
he
on.
did, yeah.
It's a great line. Reminds
Just-
me of Campese coming in between
He
the...
just looked, he made it look very simple. As I said earlier, the two Carneys were in reasonably good form, I mean, it was a fairly iffy performance, but like the two of them are in the back three, they're not going to get as many chances to shine. Other Carney had a lovely break.
O'Driscoll
Early
sucked
on.
about 3 defenders in with his run, if you notice. Look at them all, they're all drawn to him.
He does that though, doesn't he?
Yeah,
The amount of people that are just put off by him.
Yeah. He doesn't even have to, he just has to
Darcy
stand
was
there.
out there just in case.
But that's the thing. I mean,
he was
it's
needed.
interesting you said about Ryan. Ryan is one of those guys, when he gets a 20-minute cameo, always looks great. Always,
He's
always.
full of
always.
energy and running.
And when he starts, he never looks good.
But there was I was watching him just like obviously for that few minutes that he was on, and I thought the amount of times he got his hands on the ball was phenomenal. Like just for a guy to come off the pitch cold and to be straight in and involved.
As an impact guy, he's great.
That's why I like him at 6. I mean, he's a carrier, he's a tackler. That's his two best things.
Yeah,
you
I think
know?
he could push himself for selection at the weekend.
I don't think he's in with it.
Do you not?
I don't think he's. My worry about Ryan is all the skills. Right, he's a great tackler. He's a great carrier. Decent enough hands.
Yeah.
Does all the work. Good in the line out. Whatever. He's a bit too fond of contact for my liking. I mean, he looks for the bosh instead of the break, and I think that's precluding him from playing 7 anyway. Because 7 is an open field player,
link
has
man,
to be,
yeah.
or has to have an open field mind anyway.
But he's never going to be a link man. He's never going
No,
to be
no,
a groundhog. He's
What he has to do is he has to get a bit more David Wallace, bit less David Corkery into his game. And I think at the moment the arrow is swinging towards the Corkery, but he has all the ability to go the other way as well. So
No, he has the speed as well.
Yeah, he has the lot.
Quite as fast as David
he just
Wallace,
seems to enjoy the Bosch a bit too much, And it's great. Like, I mean, the crowd loves it. The crowd loves to see a guy just go down hitting everything. But it's not always what you want,
Yeah, you need the brain, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so the table pretty much remained the same. Glasgow hammered Zebre 54-0. I think he got 8 tries in the process, and they got like about 3 tries after about 10 minutes.
Yeah,
And
that one was over quickly.
Yeah, so like they obviously have sealed second place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then the other match was Ulster beating Munster down in Thomond.
I think Munster, I didn't see the game now. I never got a chance to watch it back, but I think Munster played at least as badly as we did, if not worse.
Oh yeah, they were diabolical. I watched the game, mainly for the laughs, it must be said. No, I watched the game, and
But if we think we've problems in the back line,
the
they
worst.
put us in the halfpenny place.
Everything that people have been complaining about Rob Penny / Tony McGann / Simon Mannix, all distilled in essence into 80
one
minutes.
game.
I mean, the bookies had Munster as 18-point favourites going into the
you'd
game.
have to agree with them when you
We were
saw the
22
Oh, you would
teams.
absolutely, yeah.
We were 22-point favourites, I think.
The one thing we've seen about Ulster and
The
particularly
bookies were right, they just shifted.
yeah, whatever
Proportionally, they were right.
whatever Ulster are doing in their academy is obviously right in
Yeah.
terms of mental preparation of players. Because we saw it before. Now, they ended up getting beaten, but they didn't get hammered. Remember, they came up to us at
Around
Christmas with a
Christmas,
very
yeah.
young team.
Yeah.
And they did the same again. And they're a team that seems to be able to, whether they're going to win or lose, they're going to be able to play.
But
And
I
they
think-
did play.
I think as well, psychologically, for those young kids to go down to Tone.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Like, they
Huge.
mightn't be starters in the team even next season or the season after, but when they are eventually in the first
They'll
15
stand to them,
and they go
as
down
they
to
say.
Thomond, they'll have no fear or
Yeah,
intimidation of going down there and beating pretty much, I wouldn't say quite the full strength Munster team, but it wasn't far
Not
off.
a million
it.
miles off it. No, no. Well, that's true. And you know, the thing is, Ulster have a very good academy. That's you know, I mean, they've been populating their team now for a couple of years with guys coming through it, and you know, it's obviously still going on. I mean, obviously everybody knows about the likes of Stuart Olding and Rory Scholes, but there's other guys there as well.
Yeah, they've got guys tripping over in the centres and in the back line in
And
general.
they've got the eye humph back now as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, why did they sign him? What was that about?
I think it's just to guarantee Paddy Jackson starting, is it?
Maybe,
I think
to rotate him,
I think
yeah.
McKinney has decided to leave, whether
I think it's been decided for him.
whether on his own cognizance or otherwise.
Is it Rotherham he's gone?
Yeah. So they need somebody.
Yeah.
So Humphreys obviously wants to come home.
Yeah, this cover of somebody like Olding maybe who can play 10. There's
Yeah.
a few lads that can play 10 in there.
But then maybe they've identified that Olding isn't a 10. Maybe for
Mm.
the foreseeable future they want him playing in the centre. They don't want him exposed to 10. Maybe they don't want him playing there at all. So,
he
but
can
you
play
know,
15 as well. He can
there's
play.
always
Very
guys who
versatile
always seem
guy.
to end up coming back to various different clubs. They go away and they come back, and Humphreys is one of those guys.
Yeah, well, his big brother's the
He'll
daddy.
certainly provide plenty of entertainment. He always does.
When they put him on the wing and defending a scrum on their line.
Some wag said, I see Ulster got a new ground, but I didn't know they were going to install a turnstile in the pitch.
The thing about Humphreys is, I mean, when he's on, I mean, we've seen it. Like when he is on, he can be superb.
Oh,
I mean,
remember he played for Leicester against Munster
Yeah.
actually
Thomond
when
Park.
they beat them.
yeah, he absolutely destroyed Munster that day. He was the man
Great
that
going
day.
forward.
Yeah, he can do all sorts of stuff. Problem is that A,
You gotta
he's a
hide him
flake,
on the wing.
and B, he's not like O'Gara who couldn't tackle but tried. He doesn't even bother. You know. So Stephen Ferris is going to have a very interesting few years looking after him.
So anyway, well, we're going to play them obviously in the final and the semi-final on Saturday. Like I think you were saying, we haven't. They've only beaten us once since the turn of the century.
99, yeah.
Yeah, but they
Dublin.
certainly owe us one. I mean, every big game that
Absolutely.
we've played them, whether it's been, I think we played them in a Pro 12 semi-final a couple of seasons ago. We played them
Yeah.
in the final last year.
Yeah.
Heineken the year before. They've come up short.
Yeah.
This is this team's definite last chance.
Oh, yeah,
of,
yeah.
Last.
And it's not like obviously they're going to be there next year, or a lot of the team, but the ones that have got them to this position of getting out of their group,
Yeah,
being contenders rather than not even qualifying
Muller,
or
Cardiff,
mid-table
This
kind of team.
particular
Lads.
15/22
Yeah.
guys, that this is the end for that shape of a team. And I have a feel, they're a very good team that, to a certain extent, haven't delivered. Maybe they got to we said it before, got to the final a year too early. Next year it didn't work out for them. Then this year, obviously, they had a disaster with the red card by Jaron Payne. And that kind of stuff has a way of working its way into a team's mentality.
Yeah, well, they
We-
were a bit too fired up, I think, in Ravenhill.
Yeah.
Maybe they won't be. Who knows what they'll be
I
like.
think there was a lot of emotion in the build-up to that game. There's the new stand, was wheeling out all the golden
Jackie
oldies
Kyle
and all
and
these
all that,
lads, and as you said, there was a big emotional thing for Muller bringing his kids out before the match in the last home game and all this kind of stuff. They nearly kind of took their eye off the ball, and you could even see it by Nick Williams' reaction when, these things happen that you have to be taken off because the prop has gone off. Like that's the way
They
it
might have
is.
learned.
But the thing to remember
From
about
that.
that game is not to remember how the 40 at 15 at 15 players each, we were cruising. We were cruising. We weren't having too many problems. They were doing stuff and we were just pinging them back into their half and then taking the points when they inevitably showed ill discipline, which is an issue for that Ulster team. They are a very
have a
poorly
discipline
disciplined team. Although they didn't they share the Specsavers fair play?
Yeah.
They're ill-disciplined in the sense that we saw it in the final last year. I mean, every man and dog on the street knew that how John Lacey likes to referee a match. You get one chance at the breakdown, and then you got to get away. And everybody except the 15 Ulster players knew this, and they got pinged and they got pinged and they got pinged. and they couldn't understand why, and of course that leads to frustrations. And then by the time they'd worked it out, you know, the game was virtually gone away from them.
Yeah.
And they had a similar problem again on last week against us. The way Pierce was refereeing, Pierce is a Aviva Premiership referee, and that's how they referee over there. You get one shot, then you got to get out, and they were having the same problem. So the first thing Ulster have to do if they want to beat us is they have to play the ref.
Well,
that's the first thing they have to do.
Speaking of refs, I believe the ref is the same guy we had this week, Leighton Hodges. You know, so at least we'll know him. He's a bit kind of standoffish as a ref. I wouldn't say he's afraid to make big calls, but he's more on the laissez-faire side than he is on trying to make a point about certain.
He's a very Magnolia ref. I mean, immediately after he blows the final whistle, you forget about his existence.
That's a good sign.
Which
isn't
necessarily a bad thing. It's just that he seems to have no impact on a match whatsoever.
Now it's not a bad thing.
Again, well, sometimes you do need a referee to have an impact on a match.
Well, depending on the match.
Yeah. So we'll see how it goes. I have no particular fear nor favour of him. So
what I would be afraid if I was an Ulster fan is the amount of players, like they have a real double-edged sword with the amount of players they have coming back. It sounds like they're going to have Pienaar and Best coming back. You've also got possibilities. Afoa seems to be remote, but you wouldn't know. They might surprise us later on. But there's Ferris, Dyack. 2 or 3 others. Tui is a little bit of a niggle. Like the more of those guys you put into the team, they're all big names, so it's great to see. You know, your Afoas and all these lads.
Well, the question about Afoa isn't so much if he's available; it's if, you know, the rumor is he's been told to ferris off. You know, that he's not. He wouldn't be the most gratia of personae in the Ulster training camp. That's the rumor I've heard, anyway.
The more, they feel let down by him because, you know, the whole thing he said was he wanted to be with his family back in New Zealand. They let him go back to New Zealand several times, and now he signs for Gloucester. You know, if he signed for Auckland Blues, you'd go, well done, John, fair play to you, go back to your family. But he's now signed for Gloucester, which is not a million miles from Belfast, you know. But anyway, what it was developing there was that the more of those guys you put into your team, even though they're big names, the less match fit players you have in your starting side. I mean, you have to have Pienaar if he's fit. You just have to. So, who else you add in? You did notice though that Paul Marshall didn't Paul Marshall get left out last week? It was Heaney.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
So maybe that means they were resting him for the game. Who knows? Maybe Pienaar won't.
But they've
be back.
done that twice. They've done. If you remember, 2 years ago before the Heineken final, they went on. We were playing. In the lead up, we had the semi-final of the Pro 12 the week before the Heineken final. They didn't have a game; they had a free weekend. They took the team off to Portugal to get away from the hype up in the north.
That's right.
Then last season we had the Amelin the week before the Pro 12 final, where they had again a week off, and they certainly, while it was a very close game last season, I don't think they were quite on the money. You know, because they were having this. It's a juggling act, I suppose, between resting players and being a little bit ill prepared, or
it's always the one, isn't it? Sometimes the team that's playing every week wins, and sometimes the team that has the rest wins.
The two guys Ulster in any big match need to win. They need 2 guys on the pitch that have to be on the pitch. That's Best and Pienaar. You know, if they don't have those guys, their chances decrease exponentially. So the problem with that is if they're not fit,
you're taking a huge risk.
You're taking a risk. On top of that, they've other players who aren't fit as well, like Stephen Ferris.
The more of them you put in,
the more of them you put in, like you say. So, but they have to take the risk. Certainly in the case of Best and Pienaar, they absolutely have to, because those 2 guys are absolutely fundamental to everything Ulster do.
Pienaar's got the class to come back, even if he's not 100%, you know, and have a really good game. Looking to the one, they're not to stay on Ulster. They're not really affected in the back line. They've pretty decent, but they've got Trimble and Bow on the wings. Paddy Jackson is in good shape. Their main 10. They've plenty of play in the centres there. They can put Payne or Cave in at 13. Probably put Payne in a full back, I'd say.
Well, if Cave has as poor a game as he did against us in December,
that's true. He's not. He hasn't played well against us or against big teams. Generally, he seems to go into his shell a little bit or something. But anyway, now
Especially
think-
after
I
his
think
sort of mouthing off a little bit.
He
around
allows
the
chance to
himself.
prove
I
us
think
wrong.
he allows himself
a good
buy
player.
into the
very good player.
to some of the louder mouthed comments one gets from Ulster fans about Darren Cave versus Brian O'Driscoll, and I think he gets himself too fired up for it.
Well, you don't have Brian O'Driscoll to worry about anymore.
I mean, he started off the Heineken Cup final, for example, like a man on fire. He was absolutely superb, but then O'Driscoll just took him on 3 or 4 different plays. O'Driscoll just made him look like an idiot, and then that was him. That was him done for the match. I mean, he was as much use to Ulster as a Brow was to a Bullock for the remainder of the fixture. So the thing about Cave is we're kind of coming back to the same team every time. Every time we talk about it, Ulster have to hold their heads. That's a big problem for the team, and that may be the problem. That may well be why that team hasn't succeeded to the level, perhaps, the personnel that it has.
Well, even you think
they're
back
not cold. They're not ice cold enough. Yeah.
If you think
they're
back
not.
to 2 seasons ago, again in the Heineken Cup final, do you remember we had a rolling maul and they went in and
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a
collapsed
penalty
it?
try. Yeah.
Trimble, yeah.
Trimble, yeah. And then just a few minutes before the end, they had Tara Blanche, a guy who played, I don't know, 60, 70 times for the Springboks, did the dump tackle, got sent off, wasn't it? Or he said a yellow card.
Yeah, he
anyway.
got a yellow card, but he was less than 10
Yeah.
minutes. Yeah.
But like, you know what I mean? I know the game was over at that stage, but still just to have that level of indiscipline
Yeah.
when you need your star players.
Maybe it's us. We frustrate them.
Well, I think that we are just they're a massive bogey team, and probably instead of just trying to play their own game, they're too much emphasis on trying to out Leinster us or something.
And I hope we remain their bogey team for at least another 6 days. Or
Yeah, well, see, the thing
whatever.
is, I think that we've got this muscle memory, if that's probably not the right word, but we have a muscle memory of getting into these particular situations
Folk
over the
memory.
last.
Well, they say the mind is a muscle, so you're probably right.
Well, over the last 6 or 7, I mean, I was just looking at the stats. Like, it's unbelievable that we haven't finished outside the top 3 of the league since the 2003-04 season. Like, this is our 5th consecutive playoff.
Yeah,
We've been
first
in,
or second.
we've been in the final every
final.
final of it.
Yeah.
And you just get to and then like obviously the Amlins and the Heinekens as well throw in on top of.
We've had an awful lot of knockout rugby, and guys have learnt an awful lot how to play knockout rugby.
Also,
and most importantly, we're at home.
Yeah.
well, also, there's never been a time in the Pro 12 where an away team has won a semi-final. It's never happened once.
And I hope I don't see
Hope
it happening this weekend.
well,
I
yeah.
genuinely don't see it happening this weekend
I
either.
don't know. The way we're playing, I wouldn't count on
Well, you
it.
see, the thing is, the way we're playing is the way we have to play. I mean, everybody's complaining about the way we keep winning games with no style and by a couple of points.
Maybe
But at
we
the end
get
of the
onto
day,
that.
it's the way we keep winning games.
But no one remembers that. Like, do you remember how we played in the
Oh yeah,
in the 09 season? We didn't play particularly well, but we
nothing
won.
is a greater cause of amnesia than a big piece of silverware.
Yeah.
I mean, it is true. 2009, we played some terrible rugby.
Absolutely rubbish.
In 2008, we played what we would now look back on as terrible rugby. At the time, it was great rugby to watch
Because it was what we
because
needed.
it was what rugby we didn't think the team was capable of.
Yeah.
You remember that day over in Clonethley in the pouring rain when
Andy
you know.
Larue.
If the ball went out beyond the 9, Cheika was going mad. But it was the day for that, and that was the day that set up the win in Quins, because that was the kind of rugby we needed to be able to play to have beaten Quins that day, etc., etc., etc. And people forget that because silverware is the great cause of amnesia. And if we win, the Pro 12 again this year, a lot of it will be forgotten. A lot of it won't, and a lot of it shouldn't be, because there are issues around the team. I mean, there's no clarity at halfback. Accuracy's gone to pot, but I don't think it's all to do with the head coach. I mean, the head coach has to allow his department heads have the run of the things themselves.
wonder if there's
for
a little-
example, is Richie Murphy, for example. He is the skills coach.
Yeah.
But I wonder if there's a bit of, because John O'Gibbs is, and it's been well flagged in advance that he's leaving.
He's gone, yeah. Maybe
I
he's
just
mentally gone already.
Well, I wonder if
Because it was him originally that got that really low and hard rucking game that we kind of strung together our Heineken Cup wins on. That all started with him,
But I'd be more sort of thinking if it's the players thinking, well, he's not going to be around next season. There's a new guy coming in. Obviously,
Well, the
coming
problem
in.
is if they're thinking about that, and then next year they go in, they expect to carry on the same way, and one of the guys who was looking at them thinking that way is their coach. That's not clever. So, no, I just think that that this year it has a whiff. It's not something I've experienced because I'm actually too old, but there's a whiff of transition year about this this year's kind of thing.
Yeah, well, it is a transition year.
Yeah.
Like, let's face it, in many ways, and coach being probably the main one. Like, not kid ourselves, the coach has probably made some rough decisions during the year. Hopefully he'll learn from them. he's, by no means is he, can we exonerate him from all blame?
No.
But on the other hand, you can't blame everything on him either. He doesn't go out and jerk their elbow when they're about to take a pass so as they knock it on. He doesn't, you know what I mean?
But
the guys out there who should know
I think
better.
there's been a lot of talk about sort of
And
Isagan.
can I just develop that point? And one of the things we've talked about over the years is the leadership on the field.
Yeah.
So, if the players who are very experienced players aren't taking responsibility for their own actions, then has this whole leadership on the field thing that we've been so proud of just been empty mouth service? That's the thing. Sorry, Jay.
No, I was going to say like that. There's a lot of talk and a lot of emphasis has been placed on Nasiwa, Schmidt, and Sexton leaving last season. But one of the guys that the team has been kind of built around over the last 3 or 4 years is O'Brien, and he's been pretty much missing. He was away for say most of the autumn or all of the autumn international. He was away for the month of November,
and then he got injured.
And he got injured in December. So, and obviously only came back last weekend. So you take him out of the equation, he is the star player of our team.
Him and Healy together.
But
we're dangerous.
Toulon wanted to break the bank to buy him, and he stayed. But that's how good he is. That he was going to go. We went over to Toulon. We saw the stars in their team, and that they wanted to sign this guy. You know what I mean? And you take him out of the team, it's another kind of cut that is affecting the team.
So many things. That's why I'm starting to get very cheesed off with people who just want to hang everything on the head coach. Another aspect of it is, look, I've been said this a few times before about the way the game itself has changed. It's become a more defensive game. If you notice in the Racing game the other night,
I was saying that to you on Saturday.
They were getting free kicks, and they were putting up and unders in from the free kicks. Now, there's a tactic we haven't seen in years, which has come back because contestables. It's all about contestables. It's so hard to get through defences. Defence is now king again, where it was attack. In the Joe Schmidt years, you could do stuff with attack. Look at Joe Schmidt this year. He's come out with some pretty defensive and kicking orientated displays. That's the way the game is going. And the fact, Matt O'Connor's getting lambasted for making the same decisions, but it's okay when Joe Schmidt does it.
I watched
the game. The game has moved so far in favour of the defence. Whether they change that by somebody developing some mad attack plan, or whether they do it like they did last time by changing the emphasis of the laws to favour the attacking team, something will change. But as it stands, if you see nearly every team, they're bashing up against each other in the top 14. They're bashing up against each other. Munster, Leinster, Ulster, we're all running into each other. Munster getting slagged for being too lateral, throwing the ball across the pitch.
They're throwing it out over the sideline.
Well, that's true, but
the aim is to throw it across the pitch.
They're making no progress, is the point. They're not getting past the defence. People who are chipping over the defence are getting some. If it's a real rush defence, they might get something out of it, but it's a lottery. Grubber kicks.
Just to add to that, I was watching this little clip on the Pro 12 website, and they gave the try of the year was a Glasgow try, and it was actually a chip through.
Tommy Seymour's try, yeah.
It was that was the best try. Yeah. Chip through, and the guy sprinted 40 metres.
I watched both the barrage matches at the weekend, and you had two teams who wanted to run the ball, who wanted to play what we would consider progressive, adventurous rugby, and they both lost.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. And Johnny Sexton completely owns Toulouse because all they did was they played lovely back move after lovely back move, and then all it was just a way of giving the ball to Johnny, and he'd root them right back down the pitch. And the same happened to Claremont. Claremont lost their 77 game unbeaten home record to a Castor team who kind of kicked the skin off the ball because whatever way. And that's the thing. And I was saying this after the match on Saturday to Jim, to our erstwhile pundit Jim. And I was saying that maybe what O'Connor is doing, what O'Connor is simply doing is responding and perhaps been in the forefront of developing the way that the game is now. And that maybe, like there has been in the past where legislative changes have opened up the game, maybe there's a need for another legislative change. I don't know what it is. I'm not suggesting I have any great insight into it. But, I've seen over the last, month maybe, the teams that kicked the ball won the game.
Well, you go back to 10 years ago when Matt Williams was coaching Leinster, we played the sexiest rugby you could imagine, and they had the back line to do it.
Beaten every second game.
What did we win?
But that was the same. I mean, remember all those games we lost under Gary Ella? How lovely our backline looked. You know, as
But isn't
you
it
know,
just,
they trooped off the pitch to another defeat.
Isn't it just like what the Australians goaded the English into in '91?
Yeah.
You know, they talked them into playing an open game so as they could win, and they did.
Yeah,
Like if the English team had a shut up shop in '91 and used their pack like they'd been doing, like they were used to doing, they probably would have won the World Cup.
Yeah, they would have done. No, there's no probably about it. They would have done.
So you know, you play to your strengths and you play to what's going to win the game.
Literally, what happened was David Campese talked England into losing that game.
There you go. Well,
That you remember the media in the week
Yeah.
in the lead up to the final. It was all Campese slagging off England.
Yeah,
They
it's
couldn't
brilliant.
run the ball. He was having a field day
Yeah.
because he's a rented quote at the best of times, and this time he was doing it for his country.
he's a bit of a lad, man.
You know, and he was calling them every name under the sun in terms of their backs were women, they couldn't handle the ball, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. And England came out and played this all singing, all dancing game and lost.
Bullock on steroids, wasn't that
Yeah.
what we called Carling?
Carling and Bullocks. Yeah. Rugby's first millionaire. I'd made my first million by the time I was 21.
God bless him.
Yeah. So anyway, the other semi-finals, Glasgow against Munster. Now, this is Glasgow's fourth semi-final.
Yeah.
Haven't won any of them. It's also Munster's fourth, and they've only won one. And it just got me thinking, like, you know, the amount of media that's gone on over the last 10 years about how Munster are and they're the flagship of Irish rugby and so on. Like, you think about it, they've got to 4 Pro 12 semi-finals, they've
They
won
don't
one.
give a shit about the Pro
Okay,
12.
that's
come
fair
on.
enough. They've also got to, I think, 11 or 9, no, there's an 11
Semis.
Heineken semis,
Mm.
and I think they've lost 7 of them.
Mhm.
You know, so like they're nearly men as well, but their few little victories seem to have got a lot of.
Well, that kind of differentiates the nearly man from the rest is the fact that they have won. You know, they're not like Claremont who've never won.
Yeah.
They have won. I mean, they've won more than Claremont in the last 5 years. They've won more than Claremont because you know they won a Pro 12, which Claremont that's all they have. I don't see Munster beating Glasgow. I think Glasgow are the form team in the tournament at the moment.
Yeah.
They've 8 on the trot. They've won.
They're at home. They recently gave Munster a bit of a lesson.
They've actually beaten Ulster and Munster in those 8 games. That
But they
won.
gave Munster a bit of a lesson in Scottstown there not that long ago.
No, it was in Thomond Park.
Yeah, it was. They
It was
beat
in Thomond Park.
Yeah.
Yes, no, you're right. Sorry. Yeah. But
Even worse.
yeah. But here's the thing. I don't think Munster are going to get any better.
Yeah, I don't know. If Munster could get it up for if that was a Heineken Cup, if you put the words Heineken up, if you could hypnotise Munster players and tell them they were playing a Heineken Cup semi-final, I think they'd win it.
It's not
But
warm
they
enough.
just don't have the graw for the Rabo. They just, I don't know what it is.
Well,
Unprofessionalism.
It's not,
Well,
whatever.
that
you
match-
call
No,
it,
that's
but
what that is. I mean, they're paid
not
to
in their
play
psyche.
rugby.
Well, I think as you say, it isn't in their psyche. They and I mentioned it last week, and if it's coming from a player that is held in such esteem in Munster as O'Gara, I guarantee you that it filters down throughout the rest of the team.
Yeah.
They just don't put an emphasis on the Pro 12 as much as we do.
Yeah, they
Even
don't
like-
give
even
they don't-
last year,
they don't
like-
give their wage
but-
packets back either.
But hold on, do you remember like even when they were in the Amlin Cup, like 3 seasons?
Oh yeah, they
ago,
couldn't give it.
They honestly didn't give a
Yeah.
rat's about it. Whereas
Yeah.
you know, and you remember that
At least
game.
we had the grace to go and win it.
Well, we took it seriously.
Yeah, but
Like-
that's not new. We knew that about Munster.
And the thing is, like, to get a home semi, like, everyone is a bit tighter in the pocket, whether it's an individual or a rugby club in the last few years. This game has got to be worth maybe $500,000 to the home team,
Yeah, easily.
you know?
Yeah.
Like, it's
but that's, I mean,
18,000 to 25 quid a
they
ticket.
should. They had what 8,000.
They're the
What was
cheapest
the
tickets.
attendance
Bloody
last week?
65 quid
What
for
was
the
the
beers.
attendance for the game against Ulster? 8,000.
Well, it's at 15,000, but I was nowhere near that.
Yeah, I mean, you and I both know Thomond Park well, and we know what it takes to fill it. And there was 8,000 at that match.
Let's
I-
say
well,
between
it-
8 and 15.
Well,
somewhere.
it doesn't make a difference anyway because 15,000 people paid in one way or another. So
Yeah.
I suppose the money comes in, but still only 15,000. I mean, that's 10,000 under capacity for an Interpro.
Yeah.
For an Interpro, you know. So
I wonder if it would have been a better crowd if Ulster had sent down a pretty much full strength team.
it possibly would have done. But you know, at the end of the day,
Because it was kind of, in fairness, it was a dead rubber.
Yeah.
Like, really, it didn't matter because Ulster were 6 points behind Munster, so no matter what the
but at
outcome
the end of the day,
was.
I mean, Munster will earn far more out of a Pro 12 season at the end of the year. They'll have earned more money from the Pro 12 than they will have from the Heineken Cup, right? Or they would have done had they behaved themselves properly during it. You know, because you've got how
they
many,
were leading the league for pretty much most of
They
it.
just cruised past them in the
Just
during
around the Six Nations.
But
Sorry, Dave. Like, you think you go back to that period of time, we were the ones that were missing 20 guys of our squad.
Yeah.
They were missing a lot less than that.
they're the thing, but the problem is that, you know,
yeah, and we managed to do it with a shit coach.
if their players don't take the league seriously,
Allegedly.
how on earth are their fans going to show
That's
up?
very true.
And if their fans don't show up, how on earth are they going to pay off their debts? You know, and if they can't pay off their debts, they're not going to be able to sign premium talent. You know, they're not going to be able to sign
It
a
is a
Dougie
vicious
Howlett
circle for them.
or a Christian Cullen or a Jean de Villiers or whatever. You know, it's not going to happen.
Well,
and if that doesn't happen,
They
then
got
the
it-
performances are
They
going
did
to
get
dip.
a couple of nice signings now during the week.
But they got a signing that is okay, and that was about it.
They got a guy who plays
There's a lot of
10
potential.
the whole time. They've got 2 10s and they've no 12s. Now he's a 10-12 allegedly, but he doesn't play 12 very often. So
He's still only young though, isn't he?
he is only young. So is JJ going to move to 12? Is Keithley going to move to 12? I don't know. I don't think so though. I'd say they want to keep those 2 lads at 10 and put him at 12. And then they've got another guy who's a bit of a bosher at 13,
He's
Andrew Smith.
I think he'd be the Australian equivalent of Goodman. Like, he'd be a solid pro.
They've generally had to buy in talent in their back line.
Well, we said it last year. I mean, if Munster got a chance to sign any player, they'll always go for an inside centre for some reason. They've just had a love affair with foreign or not outside foreign. But I think to a certain extent that's okay, because, you know, it is
We've all got our
Munster
Achilles heel.
Rugby, which are part of the Munster brand, but it's not really a representative team anymore. I mean, the provinces aren't really representative teams anymore, although they kind of are, but they kind of aren't.
But my
and there's
point
that
is,
kind of
though,
thing.
Dave, it's the standard and the quality that is coming up through, whether it's from schools to clubs, but essentially filtering up through the academy. And if they're not producing anyone to come into the team, whereas at least like if you're saying, well, there's no one in the market that we can go out and buy to replace Drico or whoever. Well, the fact is,
Got adequate.
you have to try and say, okay, well, there's no one from New Zealand because they don't want to leave of the quality that we want to sign because they want to play in the World Cup, which is fair enough. But what you got to do, you got to look into the schools and the academies.
Well, we're kind of drifting off with the original conversation, which is another one. The original conversation is about Munster's attitude to the Pro 12, and to a certain extent, maybe that's what you're saying, which is about Munster's attitude to player development. Maybe the two kind of come together, because
Well, isn't that what the Pro 12 was for initially?
yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. I know that Leinster fans enjoy seeing young players playing. They enjoy the speculation whether Dominic Ryan or Reece Ruddock over the last couple of years, Geordie Murphy, and then there's all the talk about the academy guys in the A side. They don't seem to get that enthused about young guys playing down in Munster the
But
way
Dave,
that we do.
who got us to this position?
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Drico
It
didn't,
is those guys.
Darcy
Yeah.
didn't.
It's Noel Reid, it's Brendan Mackin, it's Geordie Murphy, it's Jack McGrath, it's, well, not so much Jack McGrath, it's Jack O'Connell.
And it does.
It is those guys. No, I agree with you.
It
entirely.
looks like we may have some ridiculous amount of centres in the academy next year as well. Like, we've already got a few, and it looks like they're bringing in several more. So we could end up with like something like 6 centres in between the 3 years of the academy. Or
Well,
6
that's
guys who
Shotgun
can play
effect to see who
centre.
can come into.
Well, that's not necessarily about. I mean, I'm sure they've
a good
identified
thing.
the fact that we're going to be losing 2 centres over the next, including this year, over the next 2 or 3 years.
Absolutely.
So we have to replace them. And while they're in the academy, they can play right across the back line anyway. I don't think it's any fluke that Brendan Mackin has started to get some experience on the wing, because they want him on the pitch on big days.
Yeah. Well, that leads me neatly back to where we started discussing the Ulster team. I suppose we better look at what we're going to be putting out there ourselves. We've lost a hooker, so we've going to have Dundon on the bench.
I'd say he's just wants to get this season done and dusted at this stage.
Strauss.
Obviously, it's over for him now, but
Well, we've got.
at least he came back after his op.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's great to see.
And when you
that.
consider where he was before Christmas, to be out with a hamstring is, it's pretty good.
Exactly.
in advance. So, we've got our two full international front rows now -1. So we'll have Aaron Dundon. Does it really matter what we put, what order we put them out in? Possibly not. I'm feeling they're going to start Cian Healy. But I just
I
have
think
this.
I think we would play our strongest possible 15.
Well, I said it to you earlier. I just love to see if you had Sean O'Brien on the bench and Cian Healy on the bench, and the two of them came trotting on together about 50 minutes. It just would lift our team and depress theirs. But that's just.
Well, I can see there's an argument for keeping O'Brien on the bench because
I reckon he will be on the bench.
Yeah, I reckon so as well. I don't see him starting.
There's our front rows. The problem area is obviously second row. Looks like we're 90%. We've lost Mike McCarthy. So
is he out for the season or just for this game? Do you think?
Well, the season is only this game and
the next one.
possibly only this game. But we've got Toner. Toner's our, he's the one who's gonna. You could say our second row is a fella called Toner and who I don't know, but Toner is going to be starting with either Cullen or. If McCarthy's not there, maybe somebody like Denton.
I think people underestimate Cullen. He's not as mobile. Well, was he ever particularly mobile? Cullen has this immense ability to get away with. He seems to have Richie McCaw's cloak of invisibility. If I see a maul,
he's fading fast.
If I ever see a maul and Leo Cullen's on the right side of it, I know something's going wrong. Because he's never on the right side of a maul. He's very rarely on the right side of a ruck. He seems to have this ability, and he always, if you ever notice the way he does it, right? When Cullen's about to go round offside, in at the side, he always makes sure the ref is right beside him. So if you watch him, and he kind of goes to the ref, and if the ref doesn't tell him he can't, he goes. That means the ref can't really give him a yellow card for doing it because he said,
he
"I asked you."
Half-assed him,
he's very wily that way.
Well, he's going to need all of his wiles.
He has had this ability over the last 3 or 4 years to really, really upset Ulster. He gets whatever way he does it. Muller and he just find it very, very difficult to play against him. And you'd expect
hope so.
You expect Johan Muller to be a bit more equally as wily. He's plenty of experience himself. At probably a higher level than Leo in terms of international rugby. But he has this ability to set the Ulster, back five in particular.
I hope he can hold onto his ability to upset for another week at least, if not two.
I'd not have very many worries about starting Leo, to be perfectly honest.
Well, it's who you're going to have as the second row because you're going to need somebody on the bench.
And Denton, and I'd probably go for Denton.
Possibly, yeah, on form. Behind that,
unless they decide to go, like
Ruddock, like they did last week. There's an outside chance.
And then have an extra back row on the bench.
There's an outside, or they could even start Ruddock at 6 and maybe move him forward if they had to.
That's how because I would see Ruddock as the certain starter for 6.
And then John, halfbacks.
Well, we haven't finished the back row yet. It's going to be Ruddock. I would reckon
Jeno and Heaslip.
I would reckon it'll be Jeno and Heaslip with Sean O'Brien on the bench because you can't leave Jennings first. You can't leave Jennings out of a game like that. He seems to have, and you could see him up in Ulster. He was up for it. Scored against Troy. Everybody's display against Trelane was muck. I mean, I wouldn't hang that one on Jennings. He seems to always perform well in interpros and in teams that he knows well. He seems to always have the measure. And look, he got man of the match in the final against Ulster last year. You're not going to tell me he's faded that fast. That the guy's only 32 or 3. He's not like 108 or anything. I just think he has the nous, the leadership. He has it all to start. It's harsh on Murphy, but I think they might do that. They might do a bit of a dodgy gamble the way the second row is. They might have Murphy on the bench as well as O'Brien, so they could perhaps move Ruddock forward if when Cullen gets too tired to power his own invisibility cloak. Halfbacks, hopefully Redden is back, even if he's on one leg, and I don't think he's going to change away from Goppert, and probably why chop and change. Why chop and change at this stage? 2 games left.
But sure, why not break the habit of a lifetime?
It's a toss of a coin there.
Yeah, I'd say if Redden is back, Redden will play. Which would play 10? Who only knows?
Yeah, I'd say it'll have to be Goppert, and then
which means it'll be Redden or
obviously, yeah. Well, that's what happened the last time we predicted it, wasn't it? He swapped around.
I think the back 5 picks itself.
Yeah, pretty much. Kirshner is going to be back, so possibly him on the bench with the starting team that we had, starting back five that we had last week.
It said in the report from the dispatches from the front line, as it were, today, that Luke isn't
No, he's
there for
the
consideration.
season,
Okay, so how do you see the game going then, John?
Well,
We picked the team.
I don't know.
we picked, oh, let's go home. No, we picked the team, but what tactics are we going to play? Will there be discernible tactics? It's sometimes. I think Matt O'Connor has a cloak of invisibility around his tactics that we can't actually see what he's doing. Neither can the other team. The good side is neither can the other team. But it's going to be a tight game. Obviously, Ulster and Leinster, they know each other really well. We're not going to be throwing the ball around. We're going to be trying to win the little small margins, that these games are going to turn. And we're going to try and. Unlike the Edinburgh game, any little break we get, we're going to have to maximise it. We're going to have to really take it to Ulster, because they're going to take it to us. Our advantage maybe is that we'll have more fit players in terms of the ones that are on the field. We'll have more minutes under their belt. Ulster will have the biggest chip on their shoulder, though. They
must be sick of playing
losing to us. So they are going to want to. Whether they'll have anything up their sleeve, I don't know. Their backline is pretty tasty. If Pienaar's on the park, they could well. I mean, our form is not great, so they could well do a job on us. I'm how Dave feels a lot more confident than I do. I think.
Yeah, I just do, but I can see us attempting to do two things to Ulster. One, what we always do, which is
frustrate them.
Frustrate them at the breakdown, and secondly, put pressure on their kicking game, which has served us well in the past. And the third thing is something that they'll be particularly wary about because of recent times is we'll put pressure on their aerial game. I can see the ball spending an awful lot of time in the air, because Ulster will be very wary about tip tackles and all this kind of stuff, and red cards and yellow cards.
Did you even see the matchup in Ravenhill? There was a bit of that as well. Remember, actually for our try, there was an up and under. Tommy Bowe knocked it on, but he, it's like as though he was nearly exaggerating his jump. Do you know what I mean? He jumped about 4 feet in the air and knocked it on.
We let him.
We let him because we were wary of it. But
I think that's an element that I think we will
contestables. There'll be a lot of contestables from both sides. I'd say that's the way the game is played now. You're better taking a lottery of a contestable than you are trying to run through or kick over somebody. Kick long or to chip. You're better off playing something that you might get on the end of, or they might knock on, or you gain some advantage out of it.
Yeah, so I think that's those are the three areas I see us particularly targeting. I can see us.
I wonder if we'll try and put a bit more pressure on Jackson this game. I know he was man of the match up in Ravenhill, but in the bigger games he's played, and I'm talking about Heineken Cup final, even the final last season, and when he was picked to start international matches, he didn't come out of his shell. Like, he was nervous, it wasn't playing the Ospreys, or it was when it's a really high intensity game.
What we'll see very early on is you can tell very much about Paddy Jackson's mental state from who's taking command at situations. Is he demanding the ball from the scrum half so he can kick, or is he letting Pienaar do all the?
Well, I remember I went,
and that'll tell you about what kind of state of mind he's in.
I think it was the Ireland-France game last season when he started for Ireland. Murray, who was really only a newcomer in the team himself, he took everything on. He took all the pressure off Jackson. Yeah. And it'd be interesting to see if Pienaar doesn't start, then that's putting a huge amount of pressure on Jackson.
We get lads like Jennings running at Pienaar, fast guys that can get up fast in Pienaar's face, and also Jackson. But I think it might be good to have Goppert, because Ulster don't know him as well as they know Madigan, and Ulster don't fear Madigan at all, rightly or wrongly. But it's a bit of an unknown quantity with Goppert.
There's another area.
Plus, you've got Jennings able to.
Well, we said it for the build up of the match up in Ravenhill. There's a huge amount of matchups that it adds to the chip on the shoulder part from the Ulster point of view, where the Irish incumbent, or the Leinster guy, and say the second or the guy in reserve is an Ulster fella. And the whole two lineups are pretty much like that. Whether it's the centres, even the halfbacks. Madigan came in the match in Paris. Or in the second row, you've got Toner against Tui and guys like that, where the Leinster guy is the incumbent, and again, it just adds to that little bit of friction between the two.
Well, yeah, there are psychological issues, but I think there are actual real personnel issues that are kind of going to. I mean, for example, over the last couple of games, one of the kind of the go-tos, one of the things we've done, one of the areas we've targeted Ulster in is Nick Williams disengaged from the scrum.
Yeah.
He's a very slow disengager, and with Isaac Boss there and Nick Williams, when he goes to pick, we've targeted that. Now it's extremely likely that neither Nick Williams nor Isaac Boss will be playing. So you've got a different
Wilson at 8,
you've got a different dynamic there. Wilson, who's a more natural 8 in terms of the way he gets off the back of a scrum quicker, etc., etc. But he doesn't present the ball carrying threat that Nick Williams does.
Henry is a player that is going to have a huge part in this game because he's there.
There's another guy, you got him up against O'Brien, who probably wouldn't have played in the Six Nations if O'Brien had been fit.
Yeah,
Possibly,
but he's really come on.
But he really has come on. I mean, he's an international class 7 now. He's got his Six Nations medal under his belt. He's one of the big battles that Jennings has is actually going to be up against him.
Absolutely.
Because he's not going to fear anyone. He's not going to fear Jennings because he's the man. He's the current Irish number 7. I mean, it doesn't matter who's injured or who's not injured. He's the current Irish number 7. So
on the 6,
there's all sorts of little kind of personal, like you were saying, there's psychological element, but there's an actual physical element to it as well.
I suppose if 3 choices at 6, if Dyack is going to be back, if they're going to risk Ferris, or if they're going to play Henderson there. I think they've got enough second rows that they can, if Tui is fit, that they can play Henderson there as well. And they've got somebody like Stevenson on the bench. It's one area they haven't got huge depth, but they've got, if all their big guys are fit, they've got those 4 guys.
If I were an Ulster fan and I was looking at what I'd want to see because of Williams' absence and his removal as a ball carrier, I'd like to see Henderson start at 6.
Yeah,
because he does have that crash ball
super player.
Physicality.
Right. He's got speed. He's got the physicality. He's certainly got youth. Still only about 5. He's got hands.
So he has that. He has that element. And again, like you say, he's up against a kind of a guy who's ahead of him, or not really ahead of him, but parallel to him in the Irish team in Ruddock. Well, we assume Ruddock is starting. So
from an Irish point of view, we want him playing second row as much as possible, which is probably going to happen now when Mueller moves on.
Yeah,
for this game, I can see
he'll move forward. He'll move forward in the second row, the same way as Donald O'Callaghan did. I mean, he started off, getting most of his game time in the back row and then move forward. It'll be the same with Henderson. I mean, the important thing for him is getting game time, and the important thing for Ulster is his ball carrying ability in the absence of Williams. Dyack is a nice footballer.
You're making me nervous now when you're going through this.
Dyack is a nice footballer, but he's a bit nut toast.
But he's also not fit, so he's going to be coming back in cold.
So
I don't see the class of a player that can come in cold the way Ferris could.
All that's been said, Jason, I still believe Leinster will win. I mean, we've had like you say, we've had the Indian sign over Ulster over the last couple of years. When it was 15 against 15 up in Ravenhill, I don't think we were even in top gear and we were pulling away before everything went to hell in a handbasket, and I don't see it being all that different. I mean, people can say it's a semi-final and all that, but we're actually a team that one of the complaints is that we're playing too much knockout rugby.
Yeah, well, here's the time we need to start playing knockout rugby.
Yeah.
So
the style of rugby we play is knockout rugby.
5-3 is okay.
Yeah,
5-3 is good.
3-0 to do me.
Yeah, 6-5. Here's for another stoop.
Yeah,
exactly. Well, anyway, thanks again, lads, and thanks a million for watching. Cheers.